chapter 8. On that day, sovereign Ahasuerus gave to sovereigness Esther the house of Haman. So this is huge because that represents Yahweh through Mashiach, given the congregation as the queen, the house of Haman. Haman represents Hillel, who has reigned over this reality from the second heaven. So the second heaven, which has 7 levels, would be his house. But now that house will become the house of the congregation. That's why, like I have said, the 144,000 will pretty much fill the position of the third of the angels that fell with Lucifer. So the house that Lucifer left will become the house of the queen, the congregation. And it says, on that day, sovereign Ahasuerus gave to sovereigness Esther the house of Haman, the adversary of the Yahudim, the adversary of the Yahudim. Once again, showing how he represents Satan. He represents the enemy of the Yahudim. And Mordecai came before the sovereign, for Esther had explained what he was to her. So once everything came out to the light, once Esther told the king that she was a Yahudi, she tells him that Mordecai, who actually saved him once by bringing the message about the two who were conspiring against him, Mordecai was actually his, pretty much his father, for he was raising her as his own daughter, as we saw in the first chapter. Yet he was his uncle, her uncle, yet he was her uncle. So Mordecai also represents the branch of David, because remember that the name David, which means beloved, is written the same way as the word for uncle, for the uncle is the beloved of the nephew or niece. So in this case, Mordecai, as the branch of David, as an uncle, became the parent, the father of Esther as the congregation. For Yahushua came as the son, the last comes as the father. So Mordecai was a father to Esther, just like the last would be a father to the congregation. And Mordecai came before the sovereign, for Esther had explained what he was to her. So now it is like the last coming into the palace to see Mashiach, or to see Yahweh, to become one with Mashiach. And the sovereign, so this is what that represents, and the sovereign took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman. So Haman, a Satan, who had authority through the ring that he held. When he was killed, the ring was taken from him, and now is being given to Mordecai. So it represents how the authority that was in the power, in the hand of Lucifer, will be given to Michael, who comes as the last, represented by Mordecai. And that's why the signet ring that we already spoke about from different parts of scriptures, like the signet ring that was given to Yosef, now being called Yahusef, after coming out of jail. He received the name Yahusef and received the ring of authority over Egypt. And as we see also in the book of Haggai, chapter 2, it says, speak to Zerubbabel, who represents the witness like Moshe, for it means he who was sown in confusion, he who was born in Babel, the governor of Yehudah, meaning the one who deserves to rule, saying, I am shaking the heavens and the earth, which is something that Yahweh said to refer to the destruction during the flood of Noah. And Yahweh said that the coming of the Son of Man, represented by Zerubbabel, would be like the days of Noah. So now Yahweh is telling Zerubbabel, I am shaking the heavens and the earth. And both are a representation of the end times. And meaning both Noah and Zerubbabel, and both times in which this is said, that he shook the heavens and the earth. And I shall overturn the throne of reigns. The throne of reigns is the authority of Hillel, who had throughout history the authority over the reigns or the empires. That's why we see in Revelation that the beast has 7 heads, which are the 7 empires. So it is Satan holding 7 angels who had authority over the 7 empires of the world. And I shall overturn the throne of reigns, and I shall destroy the might of the reigns of the nations. The throne of reigns can be seen as Halel. The might of the reigns can be seen as Azazel. And overturn the chariots and the riders. If we take these three, obviously Samael, Halel, and Azazel. And this also refers to what happened after the Exodus with the Egyptians, the army of the Egyptians in the Sea of Reeds when it receded its waters. And overturn the chariots and their riders, and the horses and the riders shall come down, each by the sword of his brother. In that day, declares Yahweh of hosts, I shall take you, Zerubbabel, he who was born in confusion, as the prodigal son, the last, my servant, son of Shealtiel, he who was asked from the Father, he who was asked from the Father, like the desired of nations, for the nations have desired from the Creator for him, as Zerubbabel, to come. Declares Yahweh, and shall make you as a signet, for I have chosen you, declares Yahweh of hosts. So Yahweh promises the last that he will make him the signet itself. So we could see it in a couple ways. The last being the ring that Yahweh will put on to rule and set everything in motion, seal every law into action. Or we could see it as is being explained here. The ring, the authority itself being given to Mordechai as the last, after it was taken from Halel, the god of this world. And the sovereign took up his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordechai. And Esther appointed Mordechai over the house of Haman. So the house was given to the queen, but the queen appointed Mordechai as the leader of the house, just like Moshe was the leader of Yahweh's house. So it's pretty much like saying that he will be ruling over heaven and earth, obviously, because earth is under heaven. So he who rules heaven rules earth. And Esther appointed Mordechai over the house of Haman. And Esther spoke to the sovereign again and fell down at his feet and begged him with tears to put an end to the evil of Haman the Agagite and his blood which he had plotted against the Yahudim. So it's interesting that even after what we just read, Haman has been killed. So we would think, or most would think, that the threat is done. Who the king knows the enemy has been killed. The house of the enemy now belongs to the queen Esther, who is a Yahudi. Mordechai is now ruling over that house and has authority of the kingdom by having the signet ring. But still, as it says here, Esther spoke to the sovereign again and fell down at his feet and begged him with tears to put an end to the evil of Haman the Agagite and his blood which he had plotted against the Yahudim. That is because, remember that in this kingdom, if a law had passed with the ring, had been sealed with the ring of the king, which Haman had, and he had used to seal that law, there was no way to stop the law. That was it. It was a law. So now, even though Haman had died, even though the king knew and Mordechai and Esther were doing fine, there was still a law or a day chosen to go and kill all the Yahudim and take their possessions. So that's why Esther has to ask him to do something about it. And the sovereign held out the golden scepter toward Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the sovereign. So she had to go in again, and she was saved again. For he held the scepter. That means that was the only way to save her from entering and asking what she was asking for. And said, if it pleases the sovereign, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the matter is right before the sovereign, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to bring back the letters, the plot by Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Yahudim who are in all the sovereign's provinces. For how could I bear to see the evil coming to my people? Or how could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives? In a way, this could be seen as once Mordechai as the last. Well, once the last, as Mordechai, is within the presence of Yahweh after being killed like the witness. And now the congregation, as Esther, is in his presence, like the chosen few being harvested without experiencing death. Then the beast will send to kill the many. So it will be like the congregation asking for mercy and for the help to come to the many. And the sovereign Ahashverosh said to sovereigness Esther and Mordechai, the Yahudi, look, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the wooden structure because he laid his hand on the Yahudim. Now you write on behalf of the Yahudim as it pleases you. So he's saying, I cannot change it. It is done. I have done what I can, and I gave you authority. So now use that authority to do something about it. Now you write on behalf of the Yahudim as it pleases you in the sovereign's name, right? For it represents the name of Yahweh and the name of Yahushua, now given to the last to make law, and seal it with the sovereign signet ring. For a letter which is written in the sovereign's name and sealed with the sovereign signet ring, no one turns back. So these words show how the law of this kingdom was just like the law of the heavenly kingdom. For no word of Yahweh turns back to him empty. They all fulfill what they were sent to do. So the same with this law. So since the law had been written, so in a way, as it has been written, that many will die, that won't change. But we can do something for them to receive resurrection after it happens. For instance, so eternal life by being justified. So the sovereign scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan. That month is the month of Shavuot. So remember how I mentioned the 50 having to do with the 50 cubits of the wooden structure. Now we have that they were on the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, the month of Shavuot. So as I was saying, so the sovereign scribes were called at that time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day. On the 23rd day. So well, a week after Shavuot, for Shavuot is on the 15th. And it was written according to all that Mordechai commanded to the Yahudim and to the viceroys and the governors, or the viceroys and the governors and the princes of the provinces from India to Cush, 127 provinces, to every province in its own writing, to every people in their own language, and to the Yahudim in their own writing and in their own language. You see how it says to the Yahudim in their own writing and in their own language, that is Hebrew. Although some want to say Aramaic, but Aramaic was not the Yahudim's language. Aramaic was the language of those of Aram. The Yahudim, those of the Hebrews. Although it is written as well that after this exile, when the Yahudim went back to Israel, half the congregation, well, after the exile of Babylon, half the people of Israel spoke Aramaic, but they were using Hebrew in this case. As it is written according to all the Mordechai commanded to the Yahudim and to the viceroys and the governors and the princes of the provinces from India to Cush, 127 provinces, as I have said, these represent the end times. 120, the 120 jubilees, and the 7, the last week of Daniel, so the very end of times. To every province in its own writing, to every people in their own language, and to the Yahudim in their own writing and in their own language. And he wrote in the name of sovereign Ahashverosh, and sealed it with the sovereign signet ring, and sent letters by runners on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from speedy mares. So the best of the best and the most, the fastest horses to send the message. That the sovereign has granted to the Yahudim who were in every city to be assembled and stand for their lives, to cut off, to kill, and to destroy all the power of the people of province that would distress them, little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day in all the provinces of sovereign Ahashverosh, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the 13th. That is why we celebrate Purim on that day, as we will see eventually next week. This is important because you see that since there was no way to break the law or to change what had been signed, now they make a similar law, a similar letter. They even use the same terms to cut off, to kill, and to destroy. So they are trying to counteract the first one by saying, okay, so there's a law that allows people to go and kill every Yahudi and take their possessions. But now there is a law for every Yahudi to assemble and defend themselves and go and destroy any nation. So this is to represent the day of Harmagedon, the day of the war of Armageddon of Revelation 19, when the Yahudim, the heavenly army, will come on white horses with Mashiach to fight as King of Kings and Sovereign of Sovereigns, as we see in Revelation 19, against the nations that will gather together against Mashiach at the end of the 7 years at Armageddon. So to cut off, to kill, and to destroy all the power of the people in province that would distress them, little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. So you see how it says of the people or province, anybody, anywhere. One day in all the provinces of sovereign Ahashverosh on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Ab. So in the calendar, the 23rd of the third month is when they wrote that letter, which would be right here, the 83rd day of the year. And then the 13th of the 12th month, which is when everything was going to happen, is right here. You see how it says Maccabim? That is because there is a feast of the Maccabim on that day. And then the 14th and the 15th became the feast of Purim, as we will see in the, I think it will be on the next chapter. So a copy of the writing to be made law in every province was announced to all the people, so that the Yahudim would be ready on that day to be avenged on their enemies. The runners riding on royal horses went out, hastened and pressed on by the sovereign's command, and the decree was given out in the citadel of Shushan. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the sovereign, wearing royal garments of blue and white. That represents how the lads will become the king, wearing royal garments of blue and white, heavenly authority over him. Blue like the throne, white the purity that he will receive through Mashiach by his union with Mashiach. With a great crown, for he is given a crown, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. The purple is the mix of red and blue. Blue like water, Mashiach; red like fire, the last. Blue is connected to the pillar called Yakin. Red is connected to the pillar called Boaz. The mix of those two, like the first and the last, becomes purple, which is the color of royalty. And we have garment of fine linen, like the groom and the bride get dressed in fine linen for the wedding of the Lamb, which comes right after the war of Armageddon. So we see how right after mentioning what is going to happen with everybody coming against the Yahudim and the Yahudim being able to defend themselves, now we also have the fact that he is dressed the last in fine linen, as if he was getting ready for the wedding of the Lamb. In fact, the wedding of the Lamb is right before the war of Armageddon. Revelation 19, the wedding of the Lamb is mentioned right before then the war of Armageddon. But my point was that in this case, we see that the word that is coming is mentioned. Now it is mentioned that he gets dressed in fine linen. As for the wedding of the Lamb, for we know that the war would come at the end of the year on the 12th month, the month of Adar. So with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple, and the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. For the Yahudim, there was light and gladness and joy and value. For the Yahudim, verse 16. Le Yahudim, or La Yahudim, Haita, there was, Ora, ושמחה, וששון, וקר. All right, so for the Yahudim, there was light, ora, gladness. So let me see, ora, that is light. Then simcha, gladness, joy, and value. In every province and in every city, also the fact that he mentions 4 things makes reference to the fact that the Yahudim, the chosen few, will become kings and priests over the whole earth, the 4 corners of the earth, like the 4 words of worlds of creation, the 4 letters in the name of Yahweh, like the 4 creatures around the throne, and other things that go with the number 4. Was light, Mashiach is the light, and simcha. If we get the name Mashiach and change the order of the letters, we get the word Yizmach, which is he will be glad, or he will rejoice. And then joys, sason, it said, and value with the word ikar. So also light and simcha with the first, sason and ikar with the last. And in every province and in every city where the sovereign's command and decree came, the Yahudim had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land were becoming Yahudim, for the fear of the Yahudim had fallen upon them. So imagine one of the two: either there were so many Yahudim in every province as it is possible because of the promise to Abraham that we would fill the nations and his seed would be like the sand of the sea, that he would be able to be counted. But also because of Yahweh being with the Yahudim, that fear fell on them, for they knew that even if they were more, for being all the nations, they wouldn't be able to stand before or against the Yahudim. So the Yahudim were scared because there was an order to kill them. But now another order to defend themselves came, so now they were happy. Yahweh was with them. And that was shown by the fact that everybody started to get all fearful of the Yahudim, so much so that many started to convert and become Yahudim and believe in Yahweh as their mighty one, for they were afraid to be killed. So that's how this chapter ends.